Germantown, Washington strikes. Uh, okay, so this is another one of these little mini game things. I'm told that indeed there is a more complex rule set for this musket and saber system. Uh, it's obviously missing, there's stuff that's actually missing from this that fits in here. But anyway, I was relatively, what I said in the wrap, I'm more impressed with this game than I thought I would be. The Montrose one that I played earlier, I mean, it was okay, but it's just really kind of a weird little luck fest with a little bit of thinking at the end or whatever. But largely, it didn't really feel like much more than something to divert yourself for a little while. This one is a more interesting situation. I see it as kind of what was I going to say? Sort of reminds me a little bit of the Ancient Battles Deluxe that I played quite a long time ago, and something else I played quite a long time ago, some of the battles of the American Revolution, and I really should get back and finish those off. The Ancient Battles Deluxe, why? Because it was kind of historic, it was relatively historically accurate, I think more so than Great Battles of History, to be honest. But I like Great Battles of History a lot more, infinitely more, because historicity is not necessarily the end-all be-all for me. It's actually got more to do with the mechanisms and the story they tell. This doesn't tell a lot in terms of the story or whatnot, but what it does is it puts you in a situation where you're getting kind of believable results, this kind of pushing of the forces, because casualties didn't tend to be very high for most of the conflicts in the Revolution, in the American Revolution. But you had cases like Bunker Hill or something where there were a fair amount of casualties being caused, but it wasn't anything like Civil War levels or whatever. It was more about not really routing units, just forcing them to kind of stagger back. And I feel like Battles of the American Revolution gets that feel as well, and this gives it rather nicely in a smaller package, okay? But that smaller package comes with problems. First of all, the rules are not the best. And this may be because it's the quick play rules, not the full rules. I'm told, at least one viewer told me the old SPI quad games were re-released as folios by Decision Games, essentially just throwing this system onto them. I don't know, I don't think there's enough information on the old quad games counters, so they had to update the factors on stuff and everything. That would not be a sensible game to be a push game in the same way that this is. And I actually feel like the SPI versions are a little too gamey in that sort of way as well. But it feels a little bit better here. It's hard for me to review the system when I've only looked at this one game. But for this one game, it did provide what I thought was kind of an interesting sort of tactical puzzle game. Puzzle game, not in the sense that, you have to figure any one thing out or whatever, but you're constantly having to figure out your positional situation and can you make this push to get you the victory point locations that you want for the automatic victory. You're not going to generally cause casualties. I didn't have a single victory point from dead units. I had 4 leaders die. Yeah. The biggest problem I had was wading through the rules, which are, again, they're not set up in the best of fashions. I found it hard to find things. I found the particular format that they use just so much inferior to SPI's format. and maybe even inferior to GMTs. I'm not a huge fan of GMT style rules. These feel like they're written in that same sort of style, without a lot of bullet point type things. It's actually kind of mixed. Some places they spell out a number of things the way that I think it's easier to scan, and then in other places you have to basically read through a wall of text to try to find the thing you want. And in some cases it's just a couple sentences, but the piece you have doesn't appear to have anything to do with the lead sentence, so you like skip over it. They're vaguely related, but it's not obvious, and I quite often had trouble finding stuff because of things like that. Counters, they're glossy. I don't like glossy, but it's okay. The only thing I had was with the tiny counter mix, there weren't enough of the markers, especially for disrupted units and or squares. I had to pull out some randoms for that. The game itself is not the kind that I take a huge amount of enjoyment in. Again, I felt like I was thinking too much, trying to figure out the geometry and how to set things up so that, I could force the enemy into a position where they couldn't really get a good grip on my units. It feels too chess-like when I'm playing something like that, and not the kind of, sprawling battle that I really want to see, where I get a lot of story. Maybe there's a lot of mechanical actions going on that help feed into that story, but they're not hard. They're not hard in terms of mental mechanical actions. The unfamiliarity of the rules for me, they are very different from sort of the mainline old school games, which is kind of what I was expecting out of all of these. And that's where I'm pleasantly surprised, is that that's not what they are. They're not just, another little Napoleon at Waterloo type game. It's, set in a different area. It is really something that, plays a little differently. But as a solo game, it's just not as enjoyable as the kind of things that I enjoy, or get more kicks out of, where I get to watch what's happening more. Here I had to concentrate on thinking and figuring stuff out. But again, the bigger hurdle than the thinking was the actual dealing with the rules. I kind of wish I had more games of this series. Not because I'm like, ooh, this is, really up my alley, because it's not. But rather because I don't feel like I have as much of a view of it as I really would have liked. I would have liked to have, seen what, other battles in the Revolutionary era. I would be probably very disappointed seeing this system being used in the bloodier style of combat, that you see in the American Civil War. That would probably really set my teeth on edge. But I do think to myself and say, hey, that these musket and pike things I'm doing, they feel way too bloody. And yeah, the units aren't necessarily destroyed, but they're gone from the scenario a little too quickly. And I don't know how much I believe the push aspect that these games have. I know that an argument for that kind of combat system was put forward in the Battles of the American Revolution, and I bought into that argument. So this does provide that sort of feel in a smaller footprint. Some of it being that the counters and the hexes are just smaller, more than anything else. If I recall correctly. It's been such a long time since I played that, or the Ancient Battles Deluxe, both of which gave me that kind of feeling to some extent or another. Anyway, like I said, I hold a little bit more respect for this than I expected to, and I don't know if more enjoyment or not. It would definitely work better in an opposed situation where you're not picturing, this whole sort of chess-like situation and then switching hats and trying to play chess against yourself in the other way. Although there is a fair amount of luck in the combat and system, but there are a lot of decisions in it as to, do I want to take the hit and hold ground, or do I want to take the disruption and hold ground, or am I willing to fall back? It ended up a very close game. I said in the wrap that I thought I played the Brits pretty well. I maybe should have tried to hold a perimeter a little harder than I did. Because it did come down to like a 40% chance for the Continentals to win, and I don't think they were playing all that well, to tell you the truth. There is a period at the beginning of this scenario of fog, which was really irritating because as a ramp up, it gave you the most lookups and complexity at the very beginning of the game when you're trying to get used to this totally new system and everything. On the bright side, that period didn't matter much. You can't gain a lot of ground in it or anything, and those special rules of fog so hindered the Continental advance that it gave me time to get used to some of the basics of the system, even if I was getting used to the basics and the fog rules at the same time. And then, oh look, fog is gone. And now we get to play for real. But yeah, I am happy with this. Happier than I was with the Montrose one. Even if it's not really my style of game, it's not that long and definitely shows things that I can see other players enjoying more than I do. All right, up it goes.